Hello, welcome everybody. It's great to see so many of you joining us today for the third session of RISE in conversation with series of webinars hosted with IABM. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Donna Mulvey Jones, who's moved over to the US to have the amazing top job of Director of Post-Production Non-Fiction at Netflix. We've got about 40 minutes to chat and another 10 minutes for any questions at the end. So please do post any questions in the chat at the bottom, the Q&A, and we'll answer as many as we can. And I'm sure many people watching must know Donna or have worked with her in the UK, having built up her career previous to Netflix, being a head of post at Fremantle, and prior to that she had multiple roles at All 3 Media and Maverick TV. And I'm sure Netflix doesn't need much of an introduction, but just to emphasize the size of it, Netflix is the world's leading streaming entertainment service with over 183 million paid memberships in over 190 different countries. As Netflix are producing content at a mind-blowing rate, always ahead in the quality of their content and with innovations in new forms of storytelling. I have to say I'm so happy today to be asked to host this session. As someone who's designed workflows and led post teams for all manner of media companies, it's an absolute pleasure to be interviewing you, Donna. So shall we start with you just telling us a little bit about your role at Netflix and what that involves?
Yeah, hi everyone, and Nick, I'm so delighted to be here talking to you today. Thank you. And I'm a huge fan of the RISE scheme, and having been a mentor on it and having had a great mentee in Jazz a couple of years ago, it's an extra pleasure to be here and saying hi to everyone who's joined today. But yeah, I'm back to the question. So my role, so I moved to Los Angeles about 18 months ago, just can't believe how fast that's gone, to take on the role of Director of Post-Production for Non-Fiction at Netflix. And for non-fiction, that includes whether it be documentary features, documentary series, reality shows, comedy specials, anything that's not scripted really is non-fiction and fits within my team. And there's about 30 of us working in the non-fiction post team across mainly Los Angeles. There's about 4 of us in London, and we work with our filmmakers, with our production companies to help them deliver the best programming, highest quality shows into Netflix that's going to have a global launch across all those different countries with all those subtitles and dubs that enable the show to be watched all around the world. And our team, and I have an amazing team, we just help filmmakers and production companies get the best shows and enable them to be launched. So that's kind of what I do day to day.
Great.
Yeah, and I've been doing it for about 18 months.
And you work with production as well, so you get to know filmmakers right at the beginning of the process.
Yeah, it's really close. We work in really close partnership with production, with our creative leads at Netflix and the finance team. And we kind of pod up in the way that we work with production, creative, finance. But then we have lots of other cross-functional partners with our globalization team or our creative technologies team. So there's lots of different teams in Netflix. And we're a bit of we have to just work with all those different teams, marketing as well, and publicity, and it's a full team effort to get these shows up. And we have probably non-fiction at the moment, if you thought of every project from its start, budgeting right the way through to launch, we must have like over 500 titles just at the moment.
And that's just non-fiction as well?
Yeah, just non-fiction.
Wow, it's amazing. And how has COVID-19, the current situation, how has that impacted the way that you work at the moment, both in LA and globally?
Yeah, I mean, I feel really blessed to be in a company that was already thinking of these type, we were a very global company to start with, which meant that we did a lot of remote working. So this notion of having VCs and video conferences, there's nothing new there. And I was in a meeting on the day that we were all sent home, and I was actually talking about, when do you think the building is going to shut down because of COVID? And as I finished that meeting and looked around, the whole office had already gone. Like, you just pick up your laptop, come home, open your laptop, and you're back working again. Yeah. So that's like the production team. So for us, we're working really well at home. A few struggles. I mean, it's, some of the team have got children, and that's obviously a big challenge when you're homeschooling. And, so it's not without challenges, but but the technology is there and we're very used to it.
Yeah.
And then with post-production as well, you know, same with our edits. All of our partners were fantastic in getting all of our shows and editors at home, working from home, editing from home. And, you know, the show went on really.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The biggest hit was production. Obviously, we had to stop filming in a lot of cases. And so we were able to edit up until the point, obviously, that we had no more media to edit. But other than that, yeah, we're a department, aren't we, that try to find solutions to everything. So
exactly, yeah, and it's amazing that, yeah, and it's not surprising that actually it's been so easy for you, I guess, with you know, Netflix being so technically advanced, and you know, the remote working now, that a lot of people are beginning to catch up with that because of COVID. Yeah, that's brilliant. And so to talk a little bit about your career, how did you first get into the industry, and what inspired you to get into post-production?
Okay, well, I got into the industry by some pestering. I'm very good at pestering, and sent my CV a lot of times to a local production company who didn't ever get back to me, didn't even want me to work for free as work experience. And then maybe my competitive edge, really, because I was working in a company proofreading, doing in advertising, and I was getting like all the adverts ready for press and doing all the spot checks and proofreading. And one of my colleagues in that company got a job at Maverick Television, and I was just like, well, if you can get a job at Maverick Television, I want to get a job at Maverick Television. So I carried on pestering again, and I got a job as a production secretary, and I didn't even know what the job was. I just said I'd do it, so went in, got the job, and stayed in that company for actually over 13 years, just in lots of different roles as I kind of moved around. But yes, I started in production, and there was nothing about post-production that inspired me to get into post-production. I probably shouldn't say that, but it's true. Post-production to me was boys in a basement wearing woolly hats, not turning the lights on, and sitting in freezing cold air conditioning. Like that's all I knew about post-production. And when I got asked to go down to try and organize things, I was like, what, you want me to sit in the basement with the boys? It was like, oh my God, it was horrible. But I did it because I wanted to learn, because I knew nothing about it. So I saw it as an opportunity that, okay, I'll go and do post-production for 6 months. I actually said, that's all I'm doing. That's my limit. And I'm going to learn everything about post-production and then bring that skill set back to production, because I thought I wanted to be a production manager. And then obviously I went to post-production, and like 20 years later or whatever, I'm still in post-production. And then what inspired me when I was in actually working in post was, it was right at the time when new technology was just coming to fruition. You know, I remember saying to my boss at the time, you know, we're not going to be shooting on tape for much longer. You know, there's going to be like these little cards that we shoot onto. And he was like, no, that's never going to happen. I was like, it kind of sounds cool. Like it sounded impossible, but it was new, it was emerging, and I was learning stuff every day. And that's what kept me there. It was just that feeling of never stopping to learn something. Yeah. And I didn't feel that I was getting that in production. So that's kind of, and I just found people really down to earth and lovely to work with. So that also really helped.
No, that's brilliant. That's amazing. Yeah, that whole file-based transition, is such a big thing. And we're still learning, I think, from that, actually.
And I think as well that because I didn't know much about post when I went in, I found a bit of a strength of mine was being able to translate very technical things to people who weren't that technical, because I'm not technical. So I have to understand something in a way that I can talk about it. And that it makes me well placed to talk to production teams or finance teams, that I don't go on with jargon and terminology that they don't understand, because I don't understand half of it either. I try and find it in a way that's really simple and relevant to what do people need to know to do their jobs. So I think that having that angle and being able to bring a perspective to post-production that was production, and being able to say, no, actually you think that's really important to production, but it isn't. And likewise, to be able to talk to production and understand the challenges that post face that maybe production hadn't quite understood. So I think I did find that really helped my career, was being able to come from another side, bring a fresh perspective, and be able to be that kind of translator between the two teams.
Yeah, and such an important part of it, isn't it? Production, being able to translate from production to post-production and vice versa. Really important. And it's becoming more and more important, isn't it, in fact?
Well, technology's got more complicated, and so there's a lot more jargon and terms than there ever was before, and it's hard to keep up with it all the time, being honest. Especially in Netflix, there's so much to learn. I just feel like I need a year to just read all the memos and digest it all, and that's without doing my job. It's the never ending. It's like university all over again, except I don't think I actually learned this much at university.
And talking of which, how is the transition from the UK to LA? And there are similarities, differences between the two in working patterns and life balance.
Yeah, I mean, I really miss the UK. It's that's the hardest part of it at all, is that I never came out here because I wanted to live in LA. I came because it was the job opportunity of a lifetime. And it's also quite difficult to differentiate what is LA and what is Netflix, because the transition for me was both. And when I hear words all the time, or even people or companies, phrases, and I hear that and I'm like, is that a Netflix thing or is that an American thing? Like, I don't know what you're talking about, and I can't tell whether that's a Netflix term or an American term. So sometimes I do get lost in conversation and just not quite, my roots aren't here. And
do you find you're communicating with people in a different way? And socializing with people in a different way? Is it very different?
Both. I mean, from a communication, there's a lot of memos, there's a lot of meetings. The days are not, I don't actually work longer hours than I've ever worked before, because honestly, I've always worked really long hours through choice. But I would say the intensity of the days are very different. It's full on. There's meetings, literally. Like yesterday, I was like, you can get up at 9 o'clock, start your meetings, maybe even earlier than 9. And you can go all the way through to 6, and you can be like talking to someone as you're like cooking your dinner. Like it can be completely relentless. And then, even if that day finishes at 6, you're still exhausted because you've just gone back to back all day. And there's memos. Every time something comes out, there's a memo, and then there's links within the memo. And so you go into a link and you're down a rabbit hole and there's another link. So I think that people like to over communicate, I think. Again, I don't know if that's an American thing or a Netflix thing, probably a bit of both. So I think I'm much better. A lot of feedback that I've got from my team since I've been here is I need to do better at setting context. So sometimes I'll launch into saying something and then people will be like, can you just backtrack a few steps and explain the backstory as to why we've got to this point? So I'm trying to get better at doing that and giving the context, rather than just launching in and assuming that everyone who's about to hear me knows everything that's in my head.
Sure.
So, and then the social bit, I kind of miss the social bit. I miss going out for drinks after work. That doesn't really happen here. When people say, do you want to go for a drink after work? They mean literally a drink. Whereas like in London, a drink after work goes on until you're like pegging it for your last train. I think just because the way that things are spread out and the fact that people drive. So yeah, I've made a few friends out here, but it's not quite the same as the social element of just going out a lot.
Maybe better for your health.
my liver is grateful. So, definitely.
Oh, that's really interesting. And so what's the biggest challenge really over your whole career? What have you felt has been the biggest challenge? And how have you overcome them?
I think there's a few different challenges that I'll mention if this is helpful to people to hear, is that confidence and self-doubt is something that I've always had some confidence in myself, but I've also doubted myself. And I think that feeling of imposter syndrome is absolutely true. Even coming out here to Netflix, I was like kind of confident and then kind of like, really? Because that's a really big job and it's just little old me. And I think, for me, it's my background as well. I didn't, I came, it was just me and my sister, my mom, single parent family. We lived in Birmingham in a council house and just had a normal education. I wasn't like an A-star student. There was nothing, I didn't get into the industry because I knew people or because we had money or because of any privilege. It was just
right
through,
contacts, for example.
yeah, I just worked hard, and I just kind of took opportunities along the way. So when you kind of look from that point of view, sometimes I look at, you know, an opportunity and think, oh my God, can I really do that? Because you end up comparing yourself with people who you think are more successful or have had better educations and things like that. So I would say that that's normal to have that self-doubt. And then I think when it comes to taking opportunities, you need to really kind of know what you want to do. I think that's something I see a lot of people struggle with, when people say that they want to get somewhere but haven't really identified what that goal is in the first place. And it means taking risks. And I would say that in my career, I've done things where I've like left a company that I was at for 13 years, or left the country, for example, which that's a really big risk if that doesn't work out. Especially as I had the most amazing job at Fremantle. I was like, am I leaving this job to go and take something where I might get fired within a couple of months? Because, you know, you hear the rumors that Netflix, you know, you have to be at the top of your game, otherwise you're not there anymore. So you know, that all played into it, that fear.
Sure.
So I would say, you know, do those things, take those risks, and then, you know, I think also being prepared to be unpopular if you're going to be a leader. That's probably the only other thing that is, you know, I've had to let people go in my career. I've had to maybe give people some direct feedback that hasn't always been what someone's wanted to hear. And that can be really challenging when you want to be someone that people like. You want to be someone that people just, you know, think, oh my God, she's amazing, she's really helpful, she knows her stuff. And yet sometimes you're being unpopular by doing reorganizations or letting people go or being direct with feedback. And those are the things that I think is for the greater good, but may make you a little bit unpopular in the moment. And that's been a bit of a personal challenge for me.
Yeah, and that must have been something that you've learned along the way, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. You know, one of the things that, when you think of like your career champions in your past and in your career, when I look back in the early stages of my career, the people who were my biggest champions and the people that helped me the most were usually the ones that sent me home crying every night. And which doesn't sound nice, but they weren't being mean, they were just pushing me. They were, you know, I would do something and it was like, try this, or this isn't working, and that honesty felt brutal. It felt brutal and it felt mean. It was like, but I'm trying really hard. And actually I look back now and think, wow, those individuals are the people that help me continually grow and get better, not to get complacent, and also to have some real self-awareness. Some of the things that I was doing that was probably, you know, people would say to me, you're rubbing people up the wrong way, or you're very defensive. And I still hold some of these traits, but I try really hard now. Like, I have that awareness, so I'm able to think, right, hang on a second, I'm prone to doing this, so I need to kind of you know, try and do that less. So I think that brutal honesty and betterment is what's really, really helped me. And I look back now and I know that they were doing it to be kind, but at the time I didn't realize and fully appreciate just these comments and this feedback and this honesty was really for my own benefit.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? Sort of thinking back at you know, how people have treated you as you're advancing in your career, and looking back and realizing that they're actually championing you. And,
absolutely, because sometimes, you know, and going back to that difference between the UK and the US, you know, I do think as well, there's a lot of, I see it a lot where people still want to either people please, or maybe are scared to offend people. So there's a lot of sugarcoating on things. And I do, and I'm trying to not be so direct. I've also had feedback about my feedback. So I'm trying to kind of soften that up a little bit. But if you're doing it for the right reason and you're doing it to help someone, I think that's the difference, isn't it? When you're giving feedback because you're wanting to make something better, rather than giving feedback just because you don't like something. So I think that's a big jump that I've made in recent years.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And have you had any mentors along the way, or are these people in your early career Would you say that they were your mentors?
Yeah, I did have, I mean, I have had some mentoring and some like executive coaching throughout my career. I've been very lucky to work with people. And I guess a lot of it does come down to self-awareness. It's about recognizing what you're doing, where your strengths are, so you can build on those, and not just worry about acknowledging your weaknesses, but what are your strengths, and then really build on them. I think sometimes when people look at improvements and developments, it's always about, well, what don't you do very well, and let's make that better. And I think what I learned in some of that coaching was also try and identify what you do really, really well, and then carry on doing that really, really well. So don't just focus on the bad stuff and make it better, because you're probably only going to make that bad stuff that much better. Whereas the stuff you're really good at, do it more often, build it. Like
playing to your strengths, isn't it? Learning to play to your strengths. And
absolutely. And then with the other stuff, it's like, okay, let's just make some improvements and let's just keep on trying to do things better. But I mean, having that self-awareness and I've had a lot of like 360 coaching before, where it really is just about really looking at yourself. And I mean, that's brutal as well. I remember doing that for the first time. It was horrific. It was invaluable.
Excellent. And yeah, so I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it, as well? It's like, you know, with Rise, they've just announced their mentees and mentors as well. And you were a mentor last year, weren't you? And
yeah, it was 2 years ago now. It was a great experience, and for me as well as the mentor. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm sure, and hopefully it was a great experience for Jazz as the mentee, but as a mentor, even I found it really, really beneficial.
That's good. That's good. And how have you found being a woman in during your career, and at Netflix as well?
Yeah, so I would say that the ratio of women has definitely improved since I came into post-production. I mean, that said, I was still the first female director that was a lead of a vertical or a department when I joined Netflix. But even in the short time I've been there now, there's other women in those positions. So I think it's all going up, which is great. Yeah. I think that I have to say I used being a woman to my advantage, being in a predominantly male industry. And by that, I mean using some of my kind of maybe more feminine traits of, I just found it quite easy to network with people because I like talking a lot, as you can probably tell. And I was always just, I suppose I was someone who was not afraid to ask really stupid questions. I still do that all the time. Okay. Yeah. And not to be scared of being just, you know, sharing information. I'm always, if I learn something, I pass it on. Like, I'm not someone who takes information and learns it and it keeps with me. I'm a real sharer. And having that vulnerability to just speak openly and honestly. And I think that goes down well with people, because then you get that reciprocated. So you end up learning lots more information back because you're sharing information. And so I think those are the type of things that are traditionally more feminine traits that I think was in good stead. Plus the fact that everyone wanted me on panels because they wanted to have the representation of a woman. So that really helped, because I wasn't necessarily the most technically clever person that they could have picked, but they wanted a woman on a panel. And I learned so much from that. That was the thing. All these panels I did was learning. And then I realized it was this cycle of every time I took an opportunity like that, I was learning even more and then getting more knowledge. And then ironically, I was the best person to do the next panel because I had all this wealth of information. Amazing. So yeah, just opportunities and taking them and leaning
in. Yes, you're saying yes to things, actually, taking that opportunity, even if, you know, we talked about imposter syndrome coming in earlier, didn't we? And it's, I guess it's about, you know, recognizing that everyone has that imposter syndrome and going with it.
But I think it's saying yes to the right opportunities and not just saying yes to everything, because that's something that when you say yes to everything, you can get into burnout quite quickly and end up not really having a sense of direction. I mean, for example, the first time that Netflix called me up and I had an interview, I didn't take them up on following that up for a good 6 months. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I didn't get a job offer at that point. It was just the interview process. but I just knew that the job description that they'd sent me at that moment in time was not what I wanted to do. And it wasn't enough to get me to like leave the country, for example. It just wasn't, having spent the time figuring out what that dream was for me, it was very easy to say, this isn't the right opportunity.
Yeah.
And then little did I know that waiting and being able to identify what I wanted to do would lead then to them calling back and this happening all those months later. So I think it is about saying yes to opportunities, but it is really about saying yes to the right ones and not spreading yourself so thinly that you can't do a really good job at everything that you're committing to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's really interesting, isn't it? And it's about having that, that vision of yourself, of what you want, clarity.
It's vision, and it's kind of a bit of a growth mindset of just always trying to want to do things better. But it is hard to say no to people. I think that's something you do struggle with, because you just like to say yes to people. And again, it comes down to being a bit of a people pleaser and wanting to be liked. And those are some of the trade-offs that you just have to make sometimes. And those, you know, that is what I sometimes do find challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And in terms of, so you said that you were the first director at Netflix that's a woman.
Yeah, not director at Netflix, but within post-production management.
Okay.
There were men that were leading all the different verticals. I was the first female to come in. So there's lots of directors at Netflix, and there's a lot of VPs at Netflix. It's I would say that it's not a male-dominated company at all. It's got a really good balance. And not only just for women either. It's, you know, there's a lot of focus on just diversity and inclusion in general.
Yeah, that's good. I can imagine that with Netflix, actually. And how does that compare with the UK, for example? What do you feel?
I mean, I have to say, even like at Fremantle, there was a lot of effort and energy into trying and identifying the importance of having a diverse workforce, and having lots of different, you know, not just having the same old people doing the same jobs and not bringing in any kind of fresh viewpoint. So I do think that the UK are quite strong in that area as well, and I don't know if LA is, or whether it's just Netflix. Like I say, I don't really can't really tell the difference between the two, but I know it's a big thing for Netflix. It's a big thing for Netflix in the US, but also all around the world. So that would also include the UK.
Yeah. And what one thing would you change to improve diversity in technical careers in general?
I think in general, it is just this notion of not just giving people jobs that, you know, I think there's so much recycling in this industry where people give jobs to people who, you know, they know, or their friend knows, or is someone's niece trying to get into the industry. Those kind of stories you hear all the time. And it just creates this just this recycling of just the same people with the same viewpoint on things entering the industry. And it's, you know, one of the things I did at Fremantle when I was looking for some junior level positions in the team was I was you know, finding people who had no background in the industry at all and had just shown real passion for getting into it. And I remember one of the girls that I gave a job to had been working in a Italian restaurant, and she just had the work ethic. She was a trooper. She was amazing. And now she's got a fantastic job. She's doing brilliantly. She's working her way to being a colorist. And she was just incredible. She just got fast tracked through her whole time to where she got to. And that was just seeing something about her personality in that interview that was just shone above. And it wasn't because she came from a particular course or had a particular background or any particular work experience, that it was just her and her work ethic and her personality, 100%.
And that's amazing. And yeah, I totally agree. I think that's something that would be really nice to see in this industry. You know, I think it is changing, but you know, it's...
And also, you know, she was Italian, and I remember she was so nervous that she was even struggling with her English in the interview. And I remember she was, you know, speaking Italian part of the way through the interview because she was just freaking out. And I just loved her. You know, it didn't matter that I couldn't even understand half of what she was saying. I thought she was amazing.
Yeah, that sounds great. And yeah, and this industry is very, you know, it's known for contacts, isn't it? Knowing people or climbing up through contacts and knowing people, and the networking as well, I guess. It's can be quite closed.
And those things are important. And I think that's the thing, is like, you know, to get in the industry, you do need to identify the right people. You do need to be able to network, but it's just about, if you're the person who is recruiting, is opening that out as wide as possible to allow opportunities for, you know, everyone from any walk of life to have the opportunity to be in that moment. So then you can be selecting from a wider pool. I think that the idea of connecting and networking is absolutely the way that a lot of people do get into this industry. And I think that will continue.
Yeah, and that leads us quite nicely to, you know, the current situation with COVID-19, and how, you know, any recommendations from you really of how you would recommend people getting into the industry, or you know, finding opportunities within the industry as well, moving up or whatever.
Because I think it's really, you know, it could be something that during this time people are thinking, okay, I've got no chance now during this time of getting a job. Like, this is the worst time ever, or that I'm going to have to put this on hold now for a year or two. And I don't agree with that. I think that this is an amazing time to be learning. And there's so many of these like online sessions and online events, training events. This is the perfect time to connect with a mentor, someone who potentially has got a bit more time now that they can be doing a VC because they're not having to commute into work. And it's just, and learning, there's so much, there's a wealth of information out there. And this is the time, if you're at home, to be using that to build your knowledge, build your contact base, get on LinkedIn and connect with all the right people. And if you're seeing people do online sessions, you know, follow up, keep a database of all those people and contacts. So I think this is time to use that to your advantage, and not just think that you've got to wait and pause, because the time, you know, this industry will pick back up, and hopefully sooner rather than later, and the jobs will be there. So it's just making sure that you're using this time now and building up those transferable skills, and not just you know, thinking that growth has to look like getting the job or the promotion. It's so much more than that. And this is, I think this is an ideal time to just really focus on those things.
Yeah, and I guess it's the perfect time to be reaching out to people as well, isn't it? And particularly if you're in an area, like as you were saying, from people from different backgrounds and different areas, and people who maybe live in the, you know, more the countryside, less London centric or LA centric, or
absolutely anyone can be anywhere. And I think also, don't be put off. You know, I sent a lot of emails in the earlier parts of my career, and even like the later parts of my career actually, where I would send emails. In fact, I think there might have even been one that I sent to Netflix to just touch base after I turned down the original interviews, but just wanted to keep connection, where you may not get a reply to an email. And that may feel like someone is just rejecting you, but actually it's probably just that your email landed on a day where there were 100 other emails coming in. It's fallen to the bottom of someone's inbox and they've completely just forgotten about it. But the next day, or maybe don't email everyone every single day, but like, you know what I mean? Like the next time, it could fall at a time when someone's got that 5 minutes to reply. And I do that all the time. Sometimes I get messages or emails. I feel terrible that I don't go back to people all the time. But it's not because I'm necessarily just saying, no, I'm, you know, that I don't want to connect, or I've got nothing. It's just timing. And so like a bit like when I was sending my CV lots of times at the beginning, the one time stuck, but a few times didn't before, and that was okay. And I think if I'd only ever sent a CV once and just assumed that no one was interested, I wouldn't have got anywhere.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing about recognizing how busy people are, and that sea of emails that everybody gets now, actually, you know, let alone people who are incredibly busy with meetings all day.
And it's just perseverance and not taking it personally, but finding a way to stand out as well. I think it's important that if you are going to connect with someone, that you're giving them something to spark interest, because if it's just another generic email offering something that person is not applicable. I get people send me emails, it's not even anything to do with post-production or post-management. It's just the wrong person, it's the wrong connection. So that I'm not going to go back to that, because I can't help, and someone should have done better research to find the right person, and then because when that connection's there, you're much more likely to get a response.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. And so, yeah, I mean, I suppose sort of big takeaways from this are, yeah, taking up those opportunities, and feeling the fear, recognizing that everyone's fearful, of situations, but,
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I would say that I've definitely done things that have terrified me throughout my career, and I'm sure still will. But just do it, and just know what you want. Really try and put that time into figuring out what that dream looks like, because at least if you've got that in the horizon, you've got something to work to. And then when you are making those jumps or taking those risks, you're doing it for the right reason, not just because you've been impulsive or you've been lured into something that sounds like a great opportunity, but probably an opportunity for somebody else and not for you. And I think that is something that I did for myself a few years ago, and strongly believe that was what helped get me where I am today.
Great. Okay. Yeah. And we talked about vulnerability before, didn't we? In terms of, it's okay to be vulnerable and to talk your mind as well, and be yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it stood me in good stead. I've always been someone who's quite happy to admit when I don't know what I'm doing, or when I'm feeling unsure about something. I will say that out loud. It's kind of a bit of a cool thing right now, whether this is just a Netflix thing, but even with like Brené Brown, you're hearing talks about vulnerability, and it's the cool thing now to be vulnerable, guys. But I've always been like that. I've always just been very willing to admit when it's all gone tits up, and it has worked for me so far.
That's great. I love that. So we're coming towards the end of our chat, our in conversation. It's been really lovely to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I feel like I could carry on talking for ages, actually.
Difficult questions now. People sent in.
Yeah, we've got.
I'm not going to be able to answer.
We've got a question from Tanya. Tanya Ray. Go Donna. I grew up in West Brom. What did you learn by being a mentor? And what are the difference between that and your experiences of leading a team?
What I got out of being a mentor, it gave me chance to stop and reflect on the things that I had learned in my career. So that moment to just pause, and I'm thinking, right, how am I going to help somebody? And that meant that I had to stop and figure out what are the things that have helped me. So that moment of stopping to think and reflect was really valuable. And then you know what it's like, when you're giving a friend advice about something and you realize you're the worst person at taking your own advice. It was a bit like that. It was like one of those things where, we'd talk about something and I'd be like, why are you doing that? And then I'm thinking, that's what I did last week. And so you're kind of giving advice to someone, realizing that, and maybe that's another good thing, is that when you're thinking, how do I get out something? If you think, what advice would I be giving my best mate right now? Yeah. That's probably the advice you want to be taking yourself. And so that's how I found it quite helpful. There were moments where I was saying what was so clearly the best thing to do, and then realizing that I wasn't even following my own rules. So that helped a lot.
That's really interesting, isn't it? It's like teaching others, isn't it? It's always a very valuable experience, isn't it?
It is. And I think to the question as well about how, with leading a team, I try to be like that. I try to be a mixture between a mentor and a coach, in the way that, I want to try and help people find their way themselves by just kind of prompting questions. But then also I do see that part of my job is, where I know I can help, is to offer advice as well. And I think that that's the thing, that when I've had coaching before, I've got a lot of answers. And I think with mentoring, it's more, you're being inspired by someone else, or someone's kind of helping you you know, realize your own potential, whereas some of the coaching, I think I've got a few more takeaway
sure.
answers. So I think having the mixture of that is where I try to lean in terms of leading the team.
Yeah, and it's probably quite good to have both, isn't it, if you can. I think, and you know, mentors can be from a range of schemes like Rise, or you can ask people to be your mentors, can't you? Which I mean, I've never done that, but I think I probably have a couple of mentors in my life who are just natural mentors.
I mean, I had a mentor once, and I just asked a woman who I found inspiring in the industry if she'd mentor me a bit, and went for a few sessions, and it was amazing. I just emailed her and asked her, and she said yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a really good tip, actually. Yeah. We don't have any more questions. If any of the audience would like to send some questions, we're very willing to answer them. Yeah.
Please don't make them difficult.
Yeah. It's been really lovely talking to you about your career. And
what about you, Nic? Like, what you know, what in your career, what would you say have been your biggest challenges?
My biggest challenges? Oh, I'm not. I was expecting it to turn.
Oh, sorry. You've asked me questions for 50 minutes. It's your turn.
My biggest challenges, I think. I think that in my early years, I actually found it very difficult being a technical woman in the industry. At the early days, people used to think that I should be a producer, because I think, quite like you, I was good with people and talking to people, and people quite believed. And I did have I found I had a really good aptitude to technology. And I was quite obsessed with it, actually. I absolutely love technology, even to this day. And that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to, you know, I still do. I still always very inspired by new technology, new things, and how things work. And yeah, I think it's almost like a lot of people just didn't believe me. It was like, no, but you want to be a producer. You want to, you know, why don't you this, why don't you that? And that was, for me, that was the challenge. I think trying to make people take me seriously, and in technical roles as well, having a lot of that, people trying to tell me what the answer was, whereas actually I knew what the answer was. It's like, well, yeah, but if you let me speak, then, you know, this is actually the answer. and why don't you look at things this way? And I suppose showing another approach, really, to that, you know, very sort of usually technically minded people. There is just sort of like that sort of linear approach, whereas I think I'm very much sort of like a bigger picture sort of thinker. So yeah, I think that was always a, you know, and I think I still have that little thing of the early days of, you know, I think that creeps into my imposter syndrome a little bit as well. And I'm very careful to sort of like tick it off, really, and just say, you know, you're fine.
It can also be the motivating thing, can't it, though, when people do doubt you as well, like that feeling of wanting to, I've got even more reason now to kind of prove to me and others that, you know, I've got this in me. We've got a couple of questions, actually, that have come in. Have you seen these? Brilliant.
Okay, so from Goose Charlton, how did you find the jump from being at the coalface of post-production and on set? Oh, I'm going to read that again, sorry. How did you find the jump from being at the coalface of post and production and on set to being in a more corporate role? Was that a conscious decision? Sorry, I can't read that.
Yeah, so I remember when I started Fremantle, and my boss said to me at the time, you know, I think you're going to be really great in this role, but I do worry about you in how a corporate environment is going to suit you. And you know, some parts of being in a corporate environment really didn't sit with me at all. I hated having rules for the sake of rules. It got really frustrated. Like, what do you mean I can't do that? Like, it makes perfect sense to do that. Why does, you know, that computer says no type mentality? in a corporate world where it didn't seem to make any sense and I lost some flexibility. But that said, I really like some structure, and I really like having lots of teams and resources that have specialist areas where you have lots of support and people to go to who really know their thing. And this actually leads really nicely into Susan's question, which is, what about the culture at Netflix? What would you like to see widely implemented in the industry as a whole? And I think this leads really nicely into it, in that Netflix has got such a unique culture, and the culture deck, I think you can just go and actually just find it on the website. I think it's there. And I don't believe that it would necessarily work for every company out there, but it's certainly an interesting approach where there is the freedom and responsibility is put within every employee at Netflix to do what they think is best for the company. So what that means is we do still have structure. We still have, it's corporate. It's not a corporate company, but the size of it means that there has to be some structure. There has to be some processes and protocols in place, because obviously it's a ginormous global company. But it's not where rules are there for the sake of rules. There is this freedom and trust and empowerment in every individual, where you're recruited to, you're the expert, you're the best person for this job, and we're going to give you all the context about what we're trying to achieve and how we would like to go about doing that. And then we're going to allow you to make those individual decisions. And I think that more companies could benefit from that, rather than saying, this is what we want you to do, this is how we want you to do things. Try setting, and we go back to the word context that I kind of started with at the beginning. Try setting the goal, explaining the context, and then really trusting and empowering your team if you've got the right people in the right roles. Because I think that then allows people to flourish rather than feel like restricted. And I think that was the downfall for me of a corporate company, was the feeling like my hands were tied, even though there was no reason for them to be tied. Yeah. But equally, I've worked in companies where it's a free-for-all, and that also is just chaos. So I think it's just finding this balance between having rules and processes and goals and context, and then allowing people to just flourish and have more autonomy over their own roles and decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's allowing people, having that structure, isn't it, and allowing the freedom within that structure as well.
And freedom of time. I have to say, one of the biggest things that I enjoy is I don't have working hours or like limited holiday and things like that. That said, I don't take any holiday and I work loads of hours. So it's kind of crazy, but I'm doing that through choice, and I'm doing that because I'm deciding that that's what I need to do. It's not because, gone are the days where I sit there looking at the clock thinking I can't leave until 6 o'clock or I have to be at my desk for 9:30. Why does that matter really? Does it matter? I mean, most days I'm in at 8 o'clock, and although now I just roll out of bed in my pajamas and I'm at work. That's the thing. It's like when you're setting a rule, and I would say this for anyone who's leading teams or, challenging teams that you're in, why? Is that for the greater good? Sometimes there is. It might be because you all have to be in because you're working together in a team. But sometimes rules are just there because someone decided to put a rule in place, and not because there's a real benefit or a reason. And I think that's where I think companies could be challenged to think things through differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think things are moving in a different way now generally, and it sounds like Netflix is quite advanced in that way.
It is, and I think that a lot of companies are going to have to make changes through COVID, and it will be fascinating to see what ends up after that. When suddenly life goes back completely to normal, will some of those changes stick? Will some of those, the way that people are being at the moment about being a bit more kind and considerate and
also knowing what flexibility feels like as well.
Absolutely. And trust, will people feel that, okay, my whole workforce just work from home, and guess what? The job still got done. Because, I think there's a feeling, isn't there, certainly back in the UK, working from home was like working from home. It wasn't really working. It was just like being at home. I'm not saying that was true, but I'm saying that's a bit of a stigma, I think, that existed. And the truth is now that companies are going to see that people are working from home, and they are actually working from home.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even matter how many hours they're doing, but is the job getting done? And some people might be more might suit them to work from home. They might have more space out of the office where they're coming up with better ideas, or there's, doing more exercise, for example, or being healthier, which is something I'm trying to lean into while I'm off. And then if that makes you more mentally alert, for example, then that's great, right? That's better than waking up and
you're happy,
calling in and living off a coffee machine, which is actually probably how I was living 3 months ago.
Yeah, happy and more likely to stay in the job as well. It's much more job satisfaction. I think might have time for another. Jessica asked if you have a particular motto you stand by in life.
I do think that where there is a will, there is a way. I do think that if I want something to happen, I will find a way to make it happen. I think pretty much. Probably that one.
That's nice. I like that.
I realise I didn't make that up, by the way, but that's just a phrase that. I'm
not sure if we're going to get cut off actually, but Trudy asks, what do you think new technologies are for the future, ahead of game post and pre-production? How do they keep their competitive edge ahead of rivals?
Well, I think, both of those questions I can answer kind of with the same answer, really, in that always looking to what is, we're always researching. I think at Netflix, and I say this because I think it's also been my mentality throughout my career, is always trying to find what is that next best thing, and not necessarily changing something for the sake of change, but be constantly not settling into just, is this good enough? It's about, okay, this is good enough, but things change. So what's that next thing? And just be constantly trying to think of, not just, I found something, it's fine, this is good enough, how I work is good enough, and then staying with it, but just be constantly trying to see how we can do things better. And I think that that's probably, with Netflix, why we're ahead of the competition, is because they really embraced that and found a way to become a global company with it and be really inclusive with, their culture and the way that they attract people, the best people to go and work for them.
Great. Yeah, that's great.
They probably all possess that mindset, which is what got them the job in the first place. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that it sounds like it. That's and Tanya asks, I led my own team which was quite nurturing. I've been told in the past that I'm too nice. Is it possible to still be a nice and a leader? To still be nice as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to ask my team that. I think most of them would probably say yes. I think you can, because I think at the end of the day, it's about, even if you have to make some challenging conversations, it goes back to that idea of, if you're doing it for the right reason and you're doing it to try and help someone, then yes, you can be nice, but it's about understanding that nice isn't just telling someone what they want to hear. So if the answer is, is being nice just always giving people what they want and always telling people what they want to hear, that is not going to make you a great leader. But it doesn't mean you can't be a genuinely nice person. It just means that sometimes you may have to find ways of giving feedback, or having honest, direct conversations with people, or helping people navigate through changes that may not feel at the time like something that people want to go through. Yeah, so it's that honesty. There's honesty, really, isn't it? That's and best intention, just knowing that you're doing things for the right reason, and you're not doing things for any reason other than just because you think it's going to make something better for the company you work with or the team you work with. And it's not just about individuals. You do have to look at like the team and the company and things like that. Sure. Yeah, I remember telling someone off on a team for the first time. It was just such a horrendous experience, but actually it went down okay. And I think I'll never forget that time. It was just like, oh God, have I really got to do this? I'd properly tell someone off. Yeah, I probably really enjoyed it the first time I had to do that, but that's why I had to pull back a little bit and realise that I wasn't just having an argument with my sister at that point, that I was in a professional environment. Yeah. I don't know, I think I've become nicer as the years have gone on, for sure. That's brilliant. Well, yeah, I think no more questions for now, and we're over our time and we haven't been kicked off. Sorry. That always happens to me. I always talk too much and get thrown out at the end.
Oh, we won't get cut off. That's why they just said so. But thank you very much. It's been absolute pleasure speaking to you, and I hope that the viewers watching have got a lot out of hearing your journey, amazing journey, and thank you for your honesty as well. It's great.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for everyone watching.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.